Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Prognard. I'm your host, Jacob Williams, and today we're going to look at something really interesting. This is an unofficial expansion for Axis and Allies. This is called Middle East Combat. It was something that was put out in the early 90s. It's a game I remember playing back in high school when I was really into Axis and Allies, and when I kind of got back into gaming in the past few years, I was interested in hunting this down. Let me tell you a little bit about this game. I've already said that it was an unofficial expansion put out in the early 90s, back when Axis and Allies was wildly popular, along with the other Game Master series from Milton Bradley. And because expansions weren't really a huge thing in gaming like they are now. Um, People there were a lot more fan expansions, for a lack of a better word, and this was one of them. There was also another e- expansion that I can't think of right now, but it came in a little plastic bag, and it had like new units, like it had jeeps, landmines, rocket miniatures, things like this. But this was put out by a company called Magic and Tactics Unlimited. And I think this and Fortress, Illinois were the only games that that company put out. And a while back, I tried to find anyone related with the company, through BGG, Facebook, and all that sort of thing. And I couldn't really find anybody. Um, I was just trying to track them down to figure out, maybe talk to them about this expansion, why they came up with it, and what the design process was like, and all that. See, what else is there to talk about with the history of this game? It was originally meant to be played with the original 1984 Axis and Allies rules, um, but I have since updated it for Global 1942, and I'll try to cover that a little bit later in the video. This is going to be kind of what I'm calling a retro review, or a retro look at this, since this game is, quite old at this point. Um, let's see here. Let's talk a little bit about the theme of this game. So, this game depicts a fictional war in the Middle East sometime in the late 70s, early 80s, around that time period. The two quote unquote teams in this game are um, Russia, or USSR, and Iraq, right here in the center. They belong to a team called Red Pact, and they're fighting the coalition called Triad, which is composed of Turkey, Saudi, Egypt, and Iran. Okay. The countries in yellow are neutral countries, and I'll talk about them here in a few minutes. All right, so the way you play this game is you first have to have a copy of Axis and Allies, all right? Because you're going to use all the pieces. I mean, it might be pretty easy to see that you use the German pieces for Turkey, use the American pieces for Saudi, Egypt, Russia is Russia still, and then use the Japanese pieces for Iran and the British pieces for Iraq. All right? And this plays a lot like Axis and Allies in that you're going to, at the start of your turn, buy new units. You're going to make your you're going to make your combat moves. Resolve your combats, do your non-combat moves, and then place your deployed units. All right, so a lot of that works almost identical to Axis and Allies. And there's some key differences that I'm going to discuss here in a minute, but this game was really ahead of its time in the Axis and Allies franchise. All right. And why do I think that? Well, let me disembark here from the tripod so I can get a better view of something. what was really cool is you had different victory objectives. All right. And holding holding all of your enemy capitals, which was the victory condition of the original game, is still in there. But look at that number 1 victory condition. Hold 10 oil areas at the end of a full turn cycle. Now, what's an oil area? Well, throughout the map, like here in Russia and the Caucasus and Azerbaijan, you see these oil derricks, and they're also printed on the map here. These are oil field areas. There's one in Kurdistan, Kirkuk. Where's some other ones? Got one here in Cairo, Al-Hassa, Abadan, etc. All right, so if you hold 10 out of 14 of those, you'll win the game. And that's what I mean by ahead of its time. Newer Axis and Allies games are based on victory cities, and that really reminds me of that. All right, I'll probably disembark again from the tripod here in a minute, but here we go. Let's get a good look at the map. This is a fairly oversized map, and I'll tell you why here in just a minute. Another thing that was actually, let's just go into some rules. I've already talked about how the victory conditions are really neat. You can hold 10 out of 14 oil areas. You can hold all enemy capitals, which is a traditional Axis and Allies goal. Or you can hold just 3 different capitals at the end of a full turn cycle. Now, what do they mean by capitals? Well, throughout the board, you'll see these symbols on the board. There's one in Ankara, southern USSR, Tehran, Cairo, and Baghdad. So those are the traditional capitals of those countries. But there's also Syria and Israel are what they call neutral capitals. So you could hold those and win the game. Well, hold 3 foreign capitals. So you'd have to get those 2 and then 1 other capital. So this can actually make for some shorter games, and you can have any one of these victory conditions and win the game. So there's a lot of variability there. All right. So what are some of the rule changes from this and normal Axis and Allies? Well, first of all, each country starts off with rockets, which was a tech in the original Axis and Allies. And they also start with jet fighters. So your fighters and bombers have increased range. And in the rule book, they talk about how this is to model modern technology along with the shorter scale distances that you see in this region. Another rules change, and I'm going to disembark from the tripod again. Hopefully this will be the last time. Another thing is, on your turn, you're going to roll a die on this insurrection table, okay? And then this will do some really interesting things between rebels destroying units. You have a CIA staging a failed coup, terrorist bomb, fuel, and ammo dumps. All right, so that's pretty interesting. And then what's really interesting for Russia is that they have their own separate event table that does a lot of interesting things. All right, so that's another rules change. And Russia is also interesting because they get these auxiliary fleets that can come in on the map at the beginning of their turn, which lets them augment their forces. Oh, and let me take a slight tangent here to show you guys this thing. This is my Axis and Allies mobile command center. This is something I put together. I got extra rondels that I can give out to people. I got industrial complexes, because these are still cool to have on your maps, even though newer versions use these chits. Also had some traditional AA guns, some marshalling cards, some reproduction dollars, tons of poker chips to use. So yeah, this is my little mobile Axis and Allies command center. Just thought I would show that off. It's really easy to take this to a game day and really keep your stuff organized. Let me talk about this a little bit. Let me get back on the tripod here. Sorry for making some people motion sick. All right, what else do we want to talk about here? Let's talk about these neutral countries. I touched on that briefly a minute ago. This is another thing that was really ahead of its time. You see this modeled in Axis and Allies Global 1940, and I would be shocked if Larry Harris didn't use this game as part of his inspiration for his future series. But these are neutral countries like you see in different Axis and Allies games. But what made this innovative from the first game that came out in '84 is that these neutral countries have standing armies. Syria starts off with 2 fighters and 4 infantry, and you have to defeat those armies before you can take control of that country, which you'll want to do because Syria is worth 10 IPCs. And it's a foreign capital, so it's a really good strategic spot. But the key is, if you don't defeat this army is always at full strength. So if you fail to kill that, well, then you have to come back into it later with a stronger force. So that's really cool and really ahead of its time. Yeah, what else is there to say about that? Not too much. So let's move on to a different talking point. I feel like there's so much to cover in this video that it was really hard. This is the 3rd time I've shot this video, and I have like a little bulletin points outline here that I'm trying to go off of. But man, this has been a difficult video to shoot because there's just so much I want to say about this, and it's such a good expansion that it's hard to just really put my thoughts into words. So why don't we just go into why do I like this? I think the main reason why I like this is that it's not just an expansion where you have new units, okay? I already talked about how there was that one expansion that introduced the few units. But this is basically almost like its own standalone version of the game. Or a standalone game. And I usually like expansions that are like that are standalone products. So that's one reason why I like it. And it's an interesting standalone game, okay? So like maybe you played Axis and Allies and you didn't really like how Russia just had to do nothing but buy troops and, hold out against Germany while the Japanese ahistorically, started taking over China, Mongolia, Eastern Russia, and all that sort of stuff. Well, Russia is the powerhouse in this game. You'll see that they have a navy, all right? And they have that special naval rule. They have their own event table along with the insurrection table. So it's a really interesting faction to play in this game. And it's really cool to see that these people took the Axis and Allies framework and really took it to the next level. So that's one thing I like. Another thing I like is there's almost like a mini game of Fortress America in here. Because look at Iraq. Iraq is surrounded by Saudi Egypt, Iran, and Turkey. And they're all doing some sort of pincer maneuver in on them. A lot of times, you have Iran fighting Russia because they're so close. But for the first part of the game, they have a lot of key troops, like right on the border of Baghdad. So that really makes some interesting dynamics. And the thing that really balances it out is that Saudi Egypt, look how sparse Saudi Egypt is, especially on the Arabian Peninsula. They have almost nothing. So they kind of have to take their time and clear out Far East Africa. And it's hard to tell in the camera. Let me see if I can get this over here. You also have Libya right there. Let me level out the tripod. So you really have just some interesting dynamics going on here. And that's why I really, really, really enjoy this game. What are some other things that I like about it? I've already mentioned how it was way ahead of its time, like with its victory conditions in neutral countries. Um, yeah, there's not too much else to say on why I really like this game. Uh, if for some reason my incoherent babbling has made you interested on trying this game, there's two ways you can go about getting this game. It's fairly easy to find some aftermarket copies of this game on eBay and stuff like that, but they're kind of expensive. I happened to get my original copy for like $5, but it was on an eBay auction. There's a couple of buy it nows on eBay, but they're like $40, and I think that's way too much for this game. So what I did was about a year ago, I was really enjoying this game, and I thought, I would like to really modernize this to make it compatible with Global 1942. So that's what I did. I kind of did some play testing and I revised some of the rules just to bring it up to par with the newest mechanics. For instance, now that transports are standalone, I made it to where every lone transport starts off with a destroyer, to give it a little minimal defense. And I also adjusted a couple of the values on the board to, make it so when you deploy units to your industrial complexes, there's enough um, production points there to put up a decent amount of stuff. I also put the a mobilization table or a chart of what everything costs right there on the map. And I changed up some of the displays on the map to make it a little more user friendly. And in general, or where am I going with this? All right, so I took all this trouble, time, and effort to make this compatible with Global 1942 Second Edition. So that's the standard Axis and Allies you can buy at Barnes and Noble, your local game store. I mean, it's the new core set. All right. So I changed this map and I changed the rules and I changed the starting setups and I made all of these files available for free on Board Game Geek. All right. So if you go to the Middle East combat entry, you can download a high resolution JPEG of this map. You can get the rules and then there's an Excel file that shows you all the setup tables. All right. And then I printed this map up at Vistaprint. And what's funny is that this map, let me see if I can pull back on my tripod to give you a sense. So my table is 3 feet by 6 feet. All right. So this map is 3 feet by 4 feet. This is just a gigantic map. And if I can figure out how to do an insert, I'll try to insert a photo comparison of the regular map compared to this one. Now, the JPEG is high quality enough that it'll scale. So I printed overly big by accident, but you can print it pretty close to the original dimensions, or you can print out something even bigger if you want to. As you can see, there's very little loss of resolution on this. And again, I just did this at Vistaprint. I think it cost me like $20 to print this poster out. So definitely consider that an option. And then the rules are there on BGG for free. And again, I've updated them to Global 1942. I did it really conservatively, and I've play tested it, and nothing seems too far out of whack. But you're talking about a fan expansion that probably had minimal play testing anyway, so this should be pretty balanced. But if you guys print it out and start playing it, let me know if you don't think it's that balanced. What else is there to say? Here's what I want to talk about real quick. Let me get a zoom in on Kurdistan here and Syria. All right, so you see those oil derricks and even those neutral army figures? Those did not come with the expansion, okay? Those are extra pieces that I picked up at historicalboardgaming.com. Or is it historical board? I think it's historicalboardgaming.com. That's a fantastic website to get some auxiliary pieces, to get neutral army figures, to getting custom Axis and Allies dice, poker chips. They even make some of their own war games based off of Axis and Allies. I know the main one that they put out was called America, but the K is spelled Ka, and it's a alternate history if the Axis powers had taken over the United States. I've been meaning to try that game. I should pick it up sometime. But anyway, you can get these oil derricks and those extra pieces, extra chips, extra units. Because that's the thing here. This game does not, or you actually start with 2 Russian battleships, and Global 1942 Second Edition only comes with 1 Russian battleship, which is optimistic anyway, don't get me wrong. So I had to pick up an extra battleship to have enough for starting setup here. You can get industrial complexes whenever they have those in stock. Those are a hot item. They've got pieces for the World War One Axis and Allies, so Global 1914. So anyway, there's some free advertising for those guys. They do an outstanding job. All right, so takeaways. This is a great game. Definitely for a print and play that you can print up for free. I hope you guys really enjoy the work I did on that. And if you play this and you like it, definitely let me know. I think this is a hidden gem from the 90s. All right, take care, guys.